Okay, hi everyone. So today we'll be talking about UX research. So I will not be going into the specific methods or affinity mapping and so on. I'll not be going into the specific tools of UX research, but I'll be going more into the philosophy of what is UX research, what are we trying to achieve, and more into how do you do user interactions and what is the mindset needed for UX. Because I believe that's the tricky part. Picking up the processes and implementing some process or implementing some steps is not a tough thing to do. That's a relatively easier thing that you get all the protocols and you just follow the protocols. That's a very easy thing to do. But the challenging thing is to understand what is UX research. Now, and I think some of you watched this video of Don Norman, and in that he talks about how UX research as a discipline came into existence, right? So earlier, when designers were designing stuff, they were designing machines which were it was kind of self-explanatory how the machine works, right? You're an engineer or you're somebody who's using the machine for enough time. You listen to the noises of the machine, you listen to the mechanisms, and you see the mechanisms of the machine. There's enough of feedback loop within the machine that you're understanding how the machine works, right? But when you talk of digital products, they're not understandable, right? If it's a digital product, you're not quite sure if how that product works or not. I mean, so let me make it simple, right? For you, let's say you have a bike, you're driving a bike, you listen to the sounds of your bike, you understand whether your bike is functioning fine, right? If your engine is like kachak, 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 you know that, okay, there's something going wrong in the engine, or maybe the chain, there's a problem with the chain, You spend enough time driving your bike, you kind of understand how your bike functions just by listening to the sounds of your bike. And if you notice, a very good mechanic does that, right? A very good mechanic listens to the sounds of the bike very carefully, right? It's very perceptive how you deal with a bike. That can apply to a bicycle as well. So are you listening to the sounds and are you feeling the vibrations very carefully? Because sometimes if you're perceptive enough, you can sort of know which instrument is having a problem and so on. So when people are dealing with physical products, you didn't have too much of a problem there. But when you make digital products are very, very different. We do not have enough experiences with digital products. So for us to understand how they work, for us to get comfortable with them, can be a little challenging compared to physical products. So I think somewhere around 1990, Don Norman, came up with this new field of, work called UX designers, right? User experience designers. So as I've just explained, this field gets that importance because digital products are not easy to, figure out. I mean, that's how this field was born. Now, when you talk of UX, again, if you go into the coaching institutes or the coaching institutes or online training academies teach UX, I mean, it's a very, commercialized approach of UX and very myopic approach of UX, where they talk of UX being, okay, I'm building a digital product, I'll make a UX journey mapping to the digital product and I'll put the features in the right place, I'll put the proper interactions and all of that. You'll see people with 0 to 2 years experience of UX, most of them functioning this way. It's a very limited approach to what UX is. But if if you understand UX in a true sense, you'd realize that UX is about. There's a concept of holistic UX. Holistic UX is I don't just look at the experience while the user is engaging with my product, digitally. For example, if I'm Ola, I don't just look at, okay, were my features proper? Was the user able to navigate through my app quickly? And so on. I also look at what is the experience of the user inside the car. Is the user having a good experience inside the car? Am I ensuring the car is properly cleaned? If the car is not properly cleaned, can I find a mechanism through which the user can escalate that, right? And once I know that the user can escalate that, then how do I act on the feedback? Is my customer service properly trained to act on that feedback? All of that comes under, UX. So when you say that the overall experience of the user is what I'm interested in. Now, this very polluted form of UX, where is it coming from? It comes in when people who are only interested in cosmetic design, right? UI designers who don't understand the purpose of digital products, they start, getting into UX. So it's a very reduced, limited narrative of UX. But who can do really well in UX? If you're a people person, you like helping people, you enjoy seeing the happiness of people, then you might make a great UX person. So because you got the intent, you just need the mindset and you need some conceptual knowledge and some tools to execute that intention. But one very important thing for UX is that intention, where you want to serve the customer, you want to, give the best to the customer, you want to fix the pains of the customer, you want to design a great experience for the customer. It's like, imagine you're designing a birthday surprise for your friend, or your parents, or someone, right? So there again, you're designing an experience. So when you're designing an experience, of course, you're going to look at the pain points, you're going to look at the pleasure points, and you're going to design it around that. So I hope you see the larger framework of why we need UX and what we'd like to do to achieve through UX. And there, one important thing to understand is UX is not limited to the digital screen, where, you even if you're a technology company and you're only a mediator which is connecting people, on ground, like your Swiggy, and your only job is to connect people. Let's say, if you're Swiggy, you're giving a service, but if you're Amazon, when Amazon, you're giving a service, but let's say you're an Ola, then you're saying, I'm only connecting you with a driver. I don't, own the car. The driver is not employed with me. You might come up with narratives like that. But the point is, even if you're facilitating a certain experience, that is an experience which you are creating. You are designing the experience. You are telling the driver how the driver has to go about things. So that comes under the ambit of UX research. And today, companies are taking UX very seriously, because if you want longer LTV, lifetime value of a customer, you want to have good UX so the user keeps coming back. And when, if at all you're operating in a space where there's cutthroat competition, there again, UX becomes very important. And today, companies are fighting lawsuits with each other on UX, right? I mean, UX patents, are taken very seriously today, because you may have great technology, but the point is, having a good UX, I think, gives you the X factor over the technology. Or maybe you have technology which is just the same, which everybody else has access to, but you have a UX layer which is different from what the others have. Then I think you stand out, even if your technology is the same. People might be likely to consume it from your end than from. It's like saying that you're a restaurant. You have the same food which everybody else has, but the way you serve the food, the way you greet the people, the way you create an experience and excitement for them in your restaurant is different. You might do better business than the other restaurants because people overall have a good, nice experience. Now, before moving into specifics of UX research, let me narrate one incident. So yesterday I was talking to Ola customer service. So one of the Ola drivers just said, no, I won't, take this ride because it's in Paytm, and the guy walked off. And I was trying to change the payment method, and it said, no, you started your ride, you can't change. Unlike Rapido, which actually allows me to change the payment method even after the ride starts, because I realized a lot of times you'd want to change it to cash, and it's not so easy to change it to, cash. So I called up the customer service, and the guy says, sir, I understand your problem. I'm sorry. But the tone in which he says, I understand your problem, the guy doesn't understand the problem. The guy is just telling something. And I have the entire recording. So I tell that guy, you don't understand my problem. You're only repeating it. And when I say this, the guy doesn't know what to say next. Then the guy says, okay, sir, we understood your problem. Can I initiate the refund and can I take action against the driver? I said, after this entire discussion, you're asking me if you would want me to take action against the driver. I'm like, thank you. Whatever I wanted to do through this phone call, I collected my data, I collected my evidence. And the guy then responds to me, no, this I did, which was not told to me in my SOP. No. As in, the person was not oriented to how you serve a customer. The person is just throwing rules. Right? And the person just, I understand, sir, but can I do this? I understand, sir, can I do this? You realize the pronunciation and the words are all so cold. So the customer doesn't feel like, the customer only feels this company is arrogant. And when I put it on LinkedIn, you must have seen how many people came to attack. Not one person came to save the company. It's very surprising. And that talks of the magnitude of the mess up. Because are they thinking about the user experience? But on the other hand, if you look at Rapido, they call up. They're like, even if we are wrong, say sorry, but make sure the customer is taken care of. Even if we are wrong, say sorry, but make sure the driver is taken care of. Make sure every relationship is managed properly. And I'm guessing the way they talk to me, they'll be teaching them how to serve people and why it's a joy to serve people. Where they say, okay, our customer may not understand all of it. Maybe the customer, you don't know, maybe in that family, that fellow is having some problem. Maybe the, that fellow's, mother or father scolded that fellow, or that fellow's, spouse scolded that fellow or something. So that fellow is having a problem. Understand that fellow's problem. All that orientation, when it is given, the person who is actually talking to the customer is able to understand the customer and is able to first calm the customer down and let the customer know that you're valuable to us, that I'm here to serve you. So that's how you're executing a better user experience, right? So are you having, I think one thing which is very fundamental to user experiences, do you have the intention to serve the customer? So obviously when you're hiring somebody for a customer service center, would you want to hire people with the intention to serve people? Or would you hire someone with good communication skills? And Ola seems to be doing the second. You hire someone with the intention to serve people, but that person doesn't have good communication skills. That person might still find a way to serve the customer because the person enjoys serving people. The person enjoys finding a solution to people's problems. So I think overall, it boils down to this thing. What is that overall experience I would like to create for the customer, right? Do I want my customer to feel happy? Do I want my customer to feel, to realize his or her ambitions? So it may not be just around happiness, but what are the emotions that you want to build? What is that overall experience that you want to, design for your customers? That I think is the fundamental and central question to UX, right? So now going into specific concepts. So in UX, interacting with customers and observing customers and consumers is like very, very important, because that's how you kind of get a sense of things. But before that, a fundamental question to ask is, see, when you build a technology, okay, I'm talking of technology, but trust me, UX principles can be applied to non-tech products also, right? You're a school, you're a university, you're designing a way this has to happen, or you're a petrol pump and people are coming in, there again, there's user experience. So there's user experience in any business. So now let's say you're building a product, could be a technological product. You have an intention, you want the product to do something. You have a vision and an imagination of what you think the product has to do to the customer. But what happens is, what you imagine and what ends up happening are not necessarily the same. You imagine that I'm going to get this person a driver. I'm going to tell the driver when to go. I will put some buffer time. If I tell 5 minutes, I will make sure the driver can reach in 3 minutes. And you do all this. But what you probably not understand is, maybe the driver is culturally such that unless some fellow calls and says go, the flow won't go. But in your plan, it's like, no, I already told the driver to go. I'm showing the location pin to the customer. If you notice, most of the bike captains actually come immediately, but auto or cab people, cabs might come, but autos don't move. You have to call them up and tell them I'm here, the location is there, only then they move. And one problem is, again, these people are not giving them the final destination, because if they give the final destination, the driver may not come. So these are problems which you may not have foreseen when you build the product. But when you put your product into a test market, you sort of see some of these problems and you start fixing them one after the other. And the point is, when you initially bring out a product, you might get 100, 200 problems. You may not have the bandwidth to solve all of them. Because you don't have the bandwidth to solve all the problems, you would prioritize a few problems and say, these problems are integral to user experience. Without these problems, I cannot create a good user experience. So this is a priority for me. And the others, you're saying, okay, these are things which I would want to solve, but I'll put them in my bucket list and deal with them slowly. But let me fix the priority problems first, because by solving these problems, I'll be able to add genuine business value. I'll be able to maybe have a customer for a longer duration. Maybe I'll be able to get references out of my happy customers, and so on. So yeah, so what I'm saying is what you build and what it ends up being need not be the same. That's point number one. What you build and what it ends up being need not be the same. And besides that, an important thing is the user might interpret it very differently compared to how you interpret it. The user may be thinking very differently in comparison to how you think about it, right? So, I mean, according to you, maybe the product is going fine. But let us say now, let's say you are a non-vegetarian and you designed an app and you're getting very good food on the app and you're very happy with how non-vegetarian food is handled on the app. But what if your customer is a vegetarian and your customer wants something else? Or let's say you like your food being served in a certain manner, or you like being greeted in a certain manner, but your customer doesn't like it that way. Your customer is coming in from a different cultural background. Your customer is coming in from a different economic background. So then you would want your customer would want things to be different. And these become blind spots. Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say in Deep Thought, we designed our classes, we said this is how kids would be taught, and so on. But there is a kid who doesn't enjoy the kind of things which we do in our classes. The kid is a little anxious about a few things, and at that I couldn't foresee in the beginning. So then we realized the existing classroom setup we have for these kids won't work for this kid. And then when I analyzed further, I realized it was not just this kid, there were a lot of other kids who were getting into a kind of an inferiority complex because everybody else on the Zoom call was speaking a lot and these guys could not add value. Then we noticed what we designed is not working for these kids. We designed, we needed a safer space. We thought we were already a safe space, but then I realized, no, we were actually not a safe space. We need to be a more safe space. So then we created a separate classroom and said these kids go into a different classroom and the people who are handling that classroom would be better equipped to create that safety for these kids. So that gap between what our intention is and what is getting realized, and also what the user wants it to be, because what I want it to be and what the user wants it to be could be two different things. And if I can see those elusive blind spots, I think that can help me in delivering a better experience. So two considerations here, right? One consideration is my intention and action. Are they the same? Right? I'd want to observe users, I'd want to talk to users and find out. And second thing is the way I am visualizing the service. Does the user also want it that way? Right? So the beauty of, let's say you're a chef, right? You like your food to be spicy. Does it mean you'll always cook your food in a spicy manner? If you're a professional chef, you have the ability to, cook your food in different ways based on how your, customers want it to be. Right? You design, you change the taste because if you're a professional chef, you understand that the ideas of good taste and bad taste are a little problematic because you understand that taste is subjective. And the only way you'll know that is by talking to people and finding out what they want. You're a professional chef, when the order is taken, you want to get a detailed brief of the preferences, and then after the food is cooked, you want to go take some feedback directly from the customer. I hope you noticed that, right? Professional chefs directly take the feedback from the customer. They walk to the customer and ask, how is it? I cook this, I'm the chef, and so on. Why don't they depend on the waiter to pass on the feedback?
Because the waiter may not be able to understand. Also, there is a loss of information while it goes from the customer to the chef.
Exactly. And the professional chef might be able to ask some questions, might be able to look at the eyes and the body language and the behavior of the person, and from that, the chef can understand what's going on. So if someone tells you that UX research is about surveys and questionnaires, God save them. UX research is, you have conversations, you gain insights out of those conversations. Then why do you design questionnaires? Because you have a base for your conversations. But would you be limited to the questionnaire? No, you won't. The key is I want to gain as much insights as possible about my customer. so that I know what my customer is liking. I know what my customer is uncomfortable with. And sometimes your customers are not going to tell you that they're uncomfortable. Because socially, you don't want to admit, let's say you're selling something to a parent. As a parent, I don't want to admit that my child is not interested in learning, or I don't want to admit that my child is not good at math. Sometimes you may not want to admit your personal, inefficiency, or you think you come across as a bad person by making that statement. You want something, but it's not socially acceptable to go and tell that something. You will beat around the bush. You'll not tell it accurately. So to get the truth, I think is important, and that's where UX becomes an art, where you can read between the lines if required and understand what is going on. So this is why conversations with users become extremely important, because those conversations can get you insights. Some sample insights. I'm going to take case studies today, as promised, from the interaction with parents today. So conversations can lead to very good insights. So fundamentally, I think in UX research, there are a lot of things which people gather, but I am interested in 3 things more than anything else. One is, can I write my user personas? Can I imagine who my users are, right? My user is, in a user persona, you don't write it abstract, you write it in a concrete way. But again, you see that this concrete instance is one of many, right? You say, my users are young, ambitious learners. On user persona, there is Shravan Kumar, who lives in Hyderabad, who carries X years of work experience, who has so-and-so degree, and he is interested in these fields. I write all that, specific things, right? He is interested in product management. He is interested in cricket. He's interested in, South Indian food. He lives in Secunderabad. So all that detail I write in. So when you write a user persona, you can kind of imagine who your target user is. You can see it from the story of the user for whom you're trying to solve the problem. So user persona is something which becomes very important, and you'd want to write multiple user personas because you don't have all users of the same kind. So you might want 3, 4, 5 or more user personas to characterize the kind of users you might have. So one is user persona. The other one is the pain points and pleasure points. What are the areas where the user is finding it uncomfortable? And please note that sometimes when the users really admire you for what you're trying to build and so on, if they're uncomfortable, sometimes they take it on themselves rather than reporting it to you. But do recognize as a UX researcher, this is very toxic in the long run. Let's say let me give a relatable example. Let's say you're a student, you're in a class, and you admire the teacher for what the teacher is trying to give you. You like the effort the teacher is putting in, but you're not understanding. So you blame it on yourself, saying that, okay, maybe I'm not listening properly, maybe I'm not thinking properly, maybe I should work harder, maybe I should concentrate, then I understand. But in the long run, this turns very toxic. It erodes your self-esteem. And eventually you will not feel like continuing those classes at all. That doesn't help the teacher, doesn't help you either. So a UX researcher has that burden here of finding out all those instances where the user is actually blaming himself or herself, when probably the platform can do something about it, right? Because your surveys and questionnaires will not get you these insights, because the user is blaming self. The user won't tell it. So getting the user comfortable to open up and share that feedback, I think, is a very important thing. If the users get that space where they can share their feedback, you'll get a lot of interesting insights. Okay, now I'd like to go into the case study section. So today morning I was having a conversation with parents. So I said, it's a Sunday catch up, and every Sunday let's catch up for 1 hour. Let's discuss whatever problems you have. I'll give you some solutions, and you can, also I'll give you some suggestions of activities you can do with your kids and so on. So there was one parent who was telling me that my kid likes to play. My kid doesn't want to sit and read a book. Is it an age related thing? And I'm worried because my kid only wants to play all the time. I said, let's do one thing. I'll give you some reflection questionnaires, right? Use these reflection questions and let your kid reflect after playing. Because playing is very good. That's a natural part of childhood, and your kid is in 4th grade. Playing is extremely important. But can I channelize that playing to learning, right? So while the kid is playing, the kid could have observed a lot of things, right? Let's say the kid is sliding down. Wow, what kind of sounds is the slide making? What are the physics principles you may want to see? What are the people around you? What are the behavioral observations you made around people? What are the emotions of people? Did someone cry? Why did they cry? Was someone laughing a lot? Why were they laughing a lot? Was someone poking someone? Why were they poking someone? Is that right? What you'd like to see? What are the various influences in the society? Is someone wearing some kind of a dress? Why are they wearing that kind of a dress? Were they wearing a very different dress on that day? Are they having a regional festival on that day? Or if they're having a regional festival, why that particular dress? Where is that dress coming from? What are the cultures? What are the cuisines? What are the traditions of that place? Right? You see, there's so much which can be learned from observation when there's free play. But the parent was not sure if the child was learning and if that's going to help. We said we'll give you reflection questionnaires and you can keep reflecting with your child and you can keep logging your reflections. You see that this is an insight for a product. You have a product where the parent takes reflection questionnaires and the parent does reflection. What if the parent doesn't have the time? The parent hires a teacher. The teacher does a reflection with the child immediately after going to play and coming back. That way, the parent is assured that I can get my child to play as much as he or she wants to, because I have a teacher who's actually leading a reflection with the child after the play. And that can be a great program to offer to parents. And there's one more parent who was telling me that before joining Deep Thought classes, I noticed that my child doesn't like to write. And I don't know, he reads your articles which you share and he's a little inspired to start writing. And now he wants to start writing. And after every class of Teja sir, he wants to write an article and he shares it with me. He somehow got inspired to organize his thoughts in the form of writing. Now, this is an insight for me because when I reflect on this, I realize what Deep Thought is selling is not a class or contents or a course. What Deep Thought is selling is a kind of an inspiration, and that inspiration is transforming people, right? And that's happening at the level of interns. That's also happening at the level of students. And parents are able to see a visible transformation in kids. So then the question is, why is my thought process revolving around classes and courses? Why is my thought process not revolving around what kind of transformation do I want to bring out in them? And what kind of inspiration I'm subjecting them to, so that the transformation comes out. Now, unless I go hear this story, would I even realize that this is the value? The value is the transformation. Now, and why do I say the value is the transformation? Because which class triggered the kid to think in which way, I don't know. And is the kid only being limited to the class? As you notice, the kid was actually reading the articles of the teacher. And the kid was inspired by the articles of the teacher. So which means, can I design a program or a product where the kid is getting exposed to a lot of people and that exposure is putting role models before people? The kid is also getting to reflect in a class. And then maybe if this is the case, having 2 sessions of 30 minutes where in a week where you're just getting the kid into a group and the group is able to have conversations around all this inspiration they've seen asynchronously is good enough. Because then the purpose of the 30 minutes is not to teach them anything. The purpose of the 30 minutes is to make sure they internalize the habits. Does it mean the concepts and the topics which we are teaching them are not important? Of course they are. But what I'm trying to say is, even if you have a program where you just, for 30 minutes, you meet them, you have conversations and you make them follow certain habits and implement those habits in their life and learning, they're reflecting and so on. That's still a good program. So that's an insight which came out, right? And I also noticed that some parents felt the kids are learning a lot of good processes in Deep Thought, but they have not put it in implementation. So that's a pain point some of the parents were seeing. And one very interesting insight one parent brought in today was the kid was saying in Deep Thought class, they say CEO, CEO, CEO. I don't want to be a CEO. I want to be a scientist. And the kid didn't want to come to the classes initially. So then again, is the class inclusive enough if CEO is a word which is used a lot, right? Question 1. And also the kid was initially a little reluctant to come to the classes if the kid was not seeing why I have to do these classes, how are these classes going to be helpful. But when the kid participated in a Socratic dialogue and when there's recognition of the kid's efforts, the attitude of the kid towards the classes and the participation of the kid in the classes changed a lot. But she was saying it took quite some time for the kid to get recognized for the kid's efforts. So this again takes me back to an important problem statement or a pain point which I see is this entire journey of trying to walk on the path of excellence is not an easy journey. It takes some effort to, get there. So while somebody is trying to get there, am I recognizing the people every day for their effort, if not for their results? Because if the efforts are recognized, people will probably persevere on the journey, be it interns or students or parents or anyone. So the product which we're trying to develop, where we'll find the efforts of we'll document the efforts of the people from the TOC sheet or whatever, and communicate it both to the student and to the parent that, hey, nice, you did this. And how do you communicate the effort? Simple, right? So your tech already knows what all the person is doing. You have a drop-down menu through which the person will report what the person is doing. Say the person is saying that I did this reflection, or I did this article, or I did this task. So your tech understands that the person did this task, and pertaining to each task, you have content of why the task is useful, and you share content with that person. Congratulations for starting this. Congratulations for starting a writing drill. Writing drill helps you in this way. So you appreciate that person for starting that particular drill, and that can probably help them in sustaining this journey for a longer duration. So that is a very crucial product insight which I got after listening to this parent, that the recognition or the appreciation is getting a little delayed. And in a classroom, for a teacher to appreciate every student can be tough. And what if the live classroom itself can appreciate the child in a small way? When the child writes an interpretation, every interpretation of the child is doing certain things which are important in the live classroom. So can those important things be recognized? So at every point of time, can we define what we want the child to work on? And can we write recognition messages, and with permutations and combinations, can those recognition messages come in? Or even better, can you get into a mode where different people write recognition messages, you curate them, and you show those recognition messages? You have community-driven recognition messages. Say, Arvind recognizes Shravan for his efforts, Umang recognizes Arvind, and so on. And you show that to people. So you don't have the burden of creating the content. Your users write that appreciation, and you guide your users on how to appreciate people better. So that also solves the problem, right? So there's a pain point. That pain point was delayed appreciation. But that pain point could be solved through all these ideas which I'm saying. So I think it's very important to talk to your customers and consumers. And while you talk to them, it's important to cross-question them on why they're having a problem. And it's important not to jump to conclusions, but to document the problem itself, to document the possibility itself, because you might come up with better solutions later. I feel 80% energy goes into understanding the problem, 20% energy goes into solving the problem. Because a lot of times we end up solving the wrong problem, or we end up, not understanding the problem carefully while solving it. So a lot of, for example, today one parent was talking of, she was asking her child to get into some competition, and the child was saying, I won't by heart, I don't want to go into the competition. The parent is saying, I'm trying to convince the child, but the child is not getting convinced. I'm like, wait, your child told your concern that your child doesn't want to memorize. And that competition apparently wants your child to memorize. So can you find a way in which your child can participate in that competition without having to memorize? That is, if you know the pain point, then you're able to solve it. So that was again a very interesting insight where I looked at the friction between parents and children. So it's not just conversation, but it's also keeping your eyes and ears open so that you can get an insight out of that conversation. Not everything is what is presented itself. Your users, say, look, your user is not a UX researcher. Please understand that. When your user is not a UX researcher, your user may not tell you the root problem. Your user might tell you the symptoms. Your user may not give you the insight. The user only might tell you some problem which is visible. Your user may not give you insights of what are the main needs. Your user only might tell some basic aspirations and so on. But from those jigsaw puzzles, you have to put the things together and figure out what the user might require. So that's the most challenging thing in UX, right? So how do I talk to people? How do I understand what they want? And how do I corroborate that in different ways, right? One user is telling me, what is the other user telling? Do I have some other evidence which is pointing to this so that I know that this is something reliable and so on? So I think the more we work with more and more case studies, we'll be understanding how to do it. But end of the day, I think if you want a simple way to do it, a simple way to do this is, from all these conversations, what are the ideas I'm getting to serve my users better? And don't just look at their words, look at their body language, look at their eyes constantly. Are their eyes dipping? Do you see a little bit of pain in the eyes? Do you see a little bit of anger? Do you see a little bit of anxiety or frustration or negative emotions? You can read that in the body language. Then you know there's an insight to pick up. Do you see a lot of happiness or do you see a lot of intensity? So when you pay attention to the emotion, the words I think make much more sense to you. You understand, okay, why is this person getting so anxious? Then you know there's a bigger problem. Then the words suddenly make more sense to you. So writing all these things down becomes very important. So going back, we need a UX because what we intend and what happens, there could be a gap. And what we think the user wants and what the user actually wants, there could be a gap. So we do UX research. Surveys and all don't work or work only to some extent. Conversations can help us get better insights. Like we saw in the case of the chef, that you observe their body language, you can cross-question them, you can make them open up by having a candid conversation. So they reveal a few more things, to you. And also, can you design some workshops where you help them learn something? And by observing the kind of doubts and the kind of questions they ask you, again, you understand their pain points and pleasure points. So that's a very offbeat way of doing your UX research, where you don't do user interviews, you do workshops. And through workshops, you kind of get a sense of, okay, what they're experiencing and what they need. They'll anyway open up because it's like to a doctor and a lawyer, you don't lie. And if you're a good coach, people don't lie to you as well, because they want to succeed and they believe that by telling the truth to you, they'll get proper insights on something. But yes, paying attention to their body language, paying attention to their emotions makes a big difference in terms of discerning what they may have to say. But yeah, it just boils down to this. Can I have conversations? From conversations, can I get insights? From those insights, you can go solve problems. And one last thing I wish to say before opening up the house for questions is UX kind of gives you objectives. And you'd want, when you hire a UI designer, you'd want to hire a UI designer who understands UX. Because if I'm a UI designer who understands UX, who understands that, okay, this is what UX people do, this is how UX people understand the objectives, what objectives are required, and so on. So when a brief is given to me, I know how to ask questions, I know how to understand the findings of the research, and I solve my problems as per the UX mandate. For example, let's say Umang is my content writer, right? So he is executing the experience for me on a WhatsApp group. So I'm a UX researcher. Let's say I'm talking to parents, I'm understanding the pain point. Now I'm a parent, I'm on so many WhatsApp groups. I don't want to look at WhatsApp, but because this group is important, I'm forcing myself to see it. So in the first 2 seconds, if I see a message and I don't know what that message is about, what is my experience? I'm anxious. I'm unsure if I want to invest my time reading it. Why? Because the messages are very consuming. When the message is consuming, I'm unsure if I want to read it or not. So if I want to get an overall sense of what is going on, what becomes very important? That the hierarchy is clearly defined. Hierarchy as in there's one thing which is getting the highest attention. There are 3 other things which are getting second highest attention. There are probably 6 or 9 things which are getting third highest attention. So your eyes move from the first highest thing to second highest to third highest and so on. Let me give you an example of hierarchy. So if you look at this web page, your eyes first go to the heading, then they go to the video. Then you read this. You might skip the 2 paragraphs because it's a lot. Then okay, there are some videos given to you. There's a WhatsApp learning community. Then what are the assessments to complete. So there's a hierarchy here. But this hierarchy, we couldn't execute it that well because our CSS style sheet is quite confining. Otherwise, we thought of having heading 1 here, but that heading 1 didn't get executed. So what hierarchies do is they guide your eyes on where to read, where to start, and so on. I'd like to give you an example. Just one moment. I'll give you an example. Yeah, I'm showing you an example now. So look at this message. I'm a parent. I'm on this WhatsApp group. I know who has sent it. Where do my eyes go first?
The heading.
Learning competition. But do I have a seamless experience while reading the heading? This dog.google.com obstructs me.
Yeah.
This image also obstructs me. I'm not able to see that seamlessly. It's a little suffocating. And where do my eyes go next?
Dear students.
And do you see a kind of pain from jumping from learnability competition to dear students? I mean, what do you feel when you're going from there to there? Some of the jump doesn't seem natural, right? It seems a little abrupt, right?
Yeah.
And then after this, again, you're not sure. Do you get a essence of what it is in just 2 seconds? You know, there's a competition, you know, there's some information, you feel guilty, I'm missing out. You feel anxious, I'm missing out. Then again, there's something, again, I'm missing out. And there's a big link, again, not so friendly. Now let's look at another message. Even this could have been done better, but let's see this. Here, what is the first thing I look at?
The heading.
Heading. Then there's some small text. It doesn't seem like I'm missing too much. There's a time, there's a Zoom link. So I know, okay, this is a workshop and it's for parents.
Yeah.
What can you expect? Now, what if I decide not to read? What can you expect? I'm still fine, right? Because I know that there's a session. What is it about? I don't care. I know it's at 11 o'clock. I know there's a Zoom link. I'll deal with this later. At a glance, in 2 seconds, do I know what's going on?
Yeah.
There's a session for parents. It's at 11 o'clock today. There's a Zoom link given to me. What is it about? That information. What can I get from the session? Okay, there's some 3 points that told me. Now, in that 3 points, again, do you see a hierarchy?
Yeah.
First, what can you expect? Then you're seeing that you can get suggestions, you can reflect, and you will get activities. In that suggestions, again, 3 examples are given to me. And towards the end, again, a gentle reminder, okay, we'll see you at 11 today. Do you guys get what I mean by hierarchy here? This is getting the highest importance, right? This is here. Then these 3, 1, 2, 3 are here. Second level of the hierarchy. Then under 1, again, you have these 3 guys, A, B, C. And you also have that little text. Under what can you expect? You also have that little text. Now, under this 2, you have some text. Under this 3, you have some text. So your eyes first go to this level. Then your eyes go to this level. If your eyes do not go to the second level, it's still fine because this level is giving me basic overview.
Yeah.
So this is the hierarchy principle in UI.
And this is also a reason like why formatting is very good, right? Because if you continuously send the message in the same format, it's going to be very easy, right? Because I know like what structure is.
Yeah, you can get that overview very fast if you're getting people used to a format. And also, if you know that there's a format which all the spammers use usually, you'd want to move away from that format, like putting that symbols and making it attractive. An amateur might think, okay, I'm energizing it, I'm making it creative, colorful. But the point is, every spammer does that. The people will sell diyas during Navaratri or during Diwali. You get those messages, right? All those spam messages. Everyone tries to use those fancy color pens to decorate everything. So, but one fundamental thing in UI is to keep things simple, and the idea is to reduce the effort required by the user to understand whatever you want the user to understand. That's important. We don't do artificial decoration. If you use color, formatting, or anything, that's again a mechanism to make it easier for the user to understand whatever I'm saying, or rather to reduce the effort the user may have to take to understand whatever I'm saying. And consistent formatting, how is it useful? As you've said, they're used to a format that makes it easier for them to grasp whatever you're trying to say in that format. And formatting plays an important role, because if the formatting is not done properly, the cognitive load goes up. I have to put an extra effort to fill those gaps and understand what the person is trying to say. So hierarchy, let's go to the specific example. So hierarchy principle is like one thing gets a higher hierarchy, then the other, then there's a layer, then there's a layer. So when you have a lot of information, you package that information in hierarchies. You may have a major heading, then you have a subheading. Then again, you're under that subheading, let's say you have a huge paragraph. You might put some colors in a different font. Let me again see, I might be explaining UI right now, but trust me, UI is of course closely connected to UX. Let me show you the pitch deck of Deep Thought. Again, this is not the best example. I'm showing a pitch deck of Deep Thought, and I'll show you how we use UI principles carefully. Look at this picture. Where do your eyes go first?
Unmet niche.
Or it might go to the picture.
Yeah, picture.
Right. So it depends on you. So either ways, you hit there or you hit here, you know what it's about. Then you see that girl, super happy, super energetic. Then you're curious, okay, what's going on? What about this girl? Then your eyes go here, you're like, okay, there's a parent. That parent is talking about the child. Then you're still not decided if you want to read the story or not. You're like, okay, the parent is getting messages from teachers. Okay, the child is probably talking like a genuine orator. The relatives are asking the parent, okay, what does she mean by things in Deep Thought? By now, okay, there's some Deep Thought class. The kid is liking the Deep Thought class. The kid has transformed. Some relatives and teachers are curious. But what is it? I'm curious. Then I go into the text and I start reading it. So how was this hierarchy created where this is getting more importance than this? Color,
Sizing.
Size and color and spacing, of course.
And position also. Yeah.
Yeah. So three different ways used to create that hierarchy. So here again, you see bold was used to give that hierarchy. Color, size, bold, position, all used, and differentiation of background color as well to create that hierarchy. Now, if you don't use hierarchy, imagine this was also in gray. Then it appears very overwhelming. It feels like a lot of it. But when you use hierarchy, they get partitioned into separate chunks. When they get partitioned into separate chunks, I don't feel like I'm having too much to read. Now, if they're partitioned into separate chunks, but there's no hierarchy, I feel like I have too many chunks to read. Did you understand the point I was trying to make? If there's no partitioning, I feel like there's too much I wouldn't want to read anyway. I've partitioned everything, but that partitioning doesn't have a hierarchy. They're all not adding up to one top hierarchy. Again, I feel there are too many chunks to read. I will not get through all the chunks. Here you see how are you navigating. You're going from the top level of the hierarchy to the 4 subheadings to the specific subject matter. Your eyes navigate down a hierarchy. So you may not consume all the content. You may consume only the macro first and then go into the micro. So that's how the user experience is, and your UI is designed as per that user experience which you'd want. Now let's look at this here again. There's a story in the center. You see Lego blocks. You're like, you're building it using first principles. Then there's some information which you might choose to skip. But if you want to know what it is, you read it. Then you know there are 4 features of deep thought. And you know, okay, there are some kids who like the features. What is that feature about? You're getting that sense. Mindful note taking, thread builder, asynchronous learning, after class discussion, and so on. Now what they've learned, you read the text, you understand. So again, you see a hierarchy, right? Or it's flowing down a hierarchy. There's level 1, then there's level 2, there's level 3, and so on. So my eyes don't find it overwhelming. Like you see this one as well. There's a lot of information given, but your eyes find it suffocating when you have a lot of information? They don't. Why? Because this is very spacious. Your eyes first come here. There's a story which is already told here. And that again, you see the chunking, right? These 2 colors are different. Why are these 2 colors made different? Again, we want to separate them out. You're creating a hierarchy there. This is higher on the hierarchy. This is second on the hierarchy. Then you want to read this story. This whole thing is separated out as one story. Again, there's a hierarchy. This color and this color, they're made different. You're not trying to have the same color all through. You have the same color all through, it can become overwhelming and burdening for the eyes to read. And there's so much of information, I want to get it at a glance. Okay, 551 college students, they were unable to learn. Why? We're preparing children for 5th industrial revolution. They can use these resources and grow. Children are the owners of the learning process. The underlying details, I may not even read them. If I want to deep dive, I will read. Otherwise, again, there's a hierarchy, right? What will happen if I don't have a hierarchy? All this text becomes overwhelming to read, too much to read. Here, again, it's too much of text, but that's okay. You know, we didn't try to create a hierarchy because too much of a hierarchy can again make it clumsy. You're like, okay, there's a teacher, there's a quote. If they're interested, they'll read, otherwise they'll not read. But here, this is the crux. I want them to read, so I'll create a hierarchy. Here again, if you look at it, this is overwhelming text. We have decided if you want to read, zoom read. But I'm assuming you won't read it. But I'll put it in a nice and pretty way in a corner with small font size. Why am I putting a small font size? The person who doesn't want to read won't read it anyway. The person who wants to read will zoom and read anyway. But this is important to me. And when this is important to me, what do? I don't make it too big, because if I make it too big, it becomes too loud. I rather give enough empty spaces around it. And here again, I know it's overwhelming. I put it in less font size. When I put it in less font size and I put nice placeholders around it, so I'm giving a summary of what it is about. If people want to read, they'll read. If they don't want to read, they'll skip. I'm anyway making it spacious and I'm decreasing the font size. So overall, the experience for my user is, I don't feel like I'm missing out something. I still feel, okay, I'm getting a summary of whatever is being told. And if I'm interested, I will go and read the details. Now, one mistake which a lot of people make, when they do a UI, one mistake which a lot of people make when they make a UI is they try to make every element loud and flashy. Why do you highlight if you have to highlight everything? Do I make sense?
It's like, you know, when I was small, people used to use highlighter to the whole paragraph. Right? It's like that.
Yeah, that doesn't help. So the point of highlighting something is you want something to get more importance. And if there's one king, you want 5 ministers. So if there's one thing in bold, you want some text around it, which is mellowing that bold down. It's like you put a lot of mirchi. Along with the mirchi, you probably want some rice or wheat or around it to neutralize that mirchi. So you putting a lot of bold is like using a lot of mirchi. So if you look at the image which I showed you guys, now let's analyze this from a hierarchy point of view. One is, I want my weight to be reduced at the top. I don't want too much weight at the top. I don't want too much of elements at the top. I want my top part to be spacious. So when I'm getting a thumbnail here, do I want the thumbnail? Is it helping me in any way? So I just click on the close button and I disable the thumbnail. And again, this is very overwhelming for me to see a huge URL. You can use a URL shortener and have a shorter URL there. And so once you get rid of this part and you get rid of this part, then what's the problem? You created a hierarchy where this is getting importance, this is also getting importance. But for this bold guy, you needed some separation. That separation is not being enough because you wanted some text here which, you know, explains what it's about before you go into dear students. Or you don't talk about learnability competition, you talk about dear students. Or you only talk about learnability competitions and say, students, we have this for you or something like that. But clearly what is, you know, creating a problem is, I have two things which are competing for attention.
Or can we combine the both? You can say learnability competition for students.
Then you're having too much of bold, very big. There again, you're increasing the amount of time which I take to read that heading. So you may want to just put some small text. If you notice, what can you expect under that? I put, you can expect 3 things as a part of this. I know nobody will read, but I put that there. It's a softer read, right? So I said, if the bold is a mirchi, you want something to mellow it down. You put some text to mellow it down. And again, this becomes very overwhelming, not properly formatted. So this line is ending abruptly and it's coming here. So my eyes find it unpleasant. If that's the case, maybe we want to put numbering. And even when you put numbering, there's no hierarchy. See, there's a lot of information. This internally needs a kind of a hierarchy. There is a kind of hierarchy that this comes first, this comes second. You have 1 and you have 2, but the 2 is too overwhelming. So the 2 had to be broken into a hierarchy internally again. Here again, you're having the same problem. Having, you know, it's like, again, abrupt stop. You might want to have bullet points if it's abrupt.
And actually the learnability competition highlight twice actually. So
that is also a little problematic. Yeah, it feels repetitive. And why is this G sheet in bold? Not very clear. That's like if I read only the bolds, I still don't get a story out of it. So the point is, all these forms of expression that you have, right, like bold or font color and all, they're used to tell a story. But if you use them just for the sake of using them, not to tell a story, that can backfire. So you get it, right? One, this can be removed. This a URL shortener can be used. Bullet points can be used. And in that bullet points also, maybe one word can be in, maybe the bullet points can be in bold and leaving the rest of the text in normal font. And here again, maybe you can have bullet points. And if your deadline is in bold, again, that arrow, and why are you putting brackets? You put brackets if you're separating it from the flowing sentence. So you can remove the brackets. And why all of it in bold? Again, that's too overwhelming. I can have only deadline in bold because the deadline is anyway getting you the attention and they will read Wednesday, July 13th. Right? So, and again, is this deadline a part of this or is this deadline? I mean, where is this deadline in the hierarchy structure? See, the heading that is learnability competition is here. Then you have your first paragraph, second paragraph. And in the second paragraph, you have 3 lines of text. So that order, G sheet, form steps, these 3 lines are this hierarchy. So is your deadline here or is your deadline here in the hierarchy? Where is your deadline in the hierarchy? Is your deadline along with paragraph 1, paragraph 2, or is your deadline along with these 3 sentences in paragraph 2? It's here, right? Because it's one of the important details you'd want to have. So then what is this paragraph about? If I have a heading which summarizes what this is about, like you say learnability competition and you put these 4 points, and then you say how to participate and you put these points, then I know, okay, there's a learnability competition. This is how I participate and this is the deadline. By seeing the 3 headings, I get a story. So I think one fundamental concept I'd like to state through this is when you build your hierarchy, right? You make your tree in your hierarchy. Are you able to know, I mean, these 4, are they telling a coherent story? Or are you depending on going to the bottom layer to tell a story? If these four can tell a story, you're doing fine. The first thing is to build a hierarchy so it's easy to read. The second thing is, okay, fine, I'm finding it easy to read, but do I understand? Do they add a story? Here the bold is not adding a story. Let's see the other image. Here is the bold telling a story. Weekly catch up. This is the time. This is a Zoom link. It's telling a story, right? Why should I attend the catch up? Yeah, I've given you the text, read it. And what can you expect out of it? You can expect suggestions, you can expect reflections and DT activities. And there are three kinds of suggestions. What are they? The details? Yeah, you can always read it or put the content. But just with the headings, you are able to read it. You're making it very, very skimmable. You make it skimmable if the first and second hierarchy elements alone are able to convey a story. And you avoid distractions. So a lot of people think design is about decoration. Design is not decoration. So when you think design is decoration, you'll use too many fonts, too many colors, too many symbols. That to me in many ways is decoration. So you want to use those elements, then you may have to reduce the amount of text. They can be a huge distraction from otherwise a cognitively demanding read. And also depends on if you are giving in a professional context, the kind of branding you want to create out of it, that can also get diluted when you use funky, things. So, but yes, I mean, I'm okay with smileys and objects coming in, but the way you handle them, I think that becomes important. Are they gelling with the rest of the elements? If they're obstructing another element, are you giving sufficient spacing? No. Okay. So I spoke to you about the hierarchy principle, right? Another important principle is spacing. Are you giving adequate amount of spacing between two elements? If the two elements are related, your spacing is less. Two elements are not related, the spacing is more. So the amount of spacing you give is based on whether the two elements are related or not related. Now the Learning Festival and the Star are, two different ideas. The Star is like trying to invoke an emotion, while the Learning Festival is conveying what that Learning Festival is. So I might want to give some separation because I want the user to first grasp this element and then move to the second element, which is an emotion builder. What will happen when I don't give that breathing space between two entities which are different? For example, look at the Deep Thought logo. You see a decent amount of gap between the logo and the text. What would happen if the text was even closer? It would feel a little suffocating. You don't want the gap to be too high, because if the gap is too high, it becomes suffocating. Sorry, too low, it becomes suffocating. What if the gap is too high? You don't connect them at all. You don't feel like they're, related to the same entity. So this is how a UI designer can implement whatever objectives you want to achieve. As a UX designer, if you're a UX designer, you understand what kind of experience you want to design for the user. But the UI designer reaches those objectives. You're saying, I want my user to feel this way. I want my user within 2 clicks to be able to do this. Then the UI designer finds a way to achieve that. As a UX designer, you tell, I want my user to be able to get what this is about in 2 to 3 seconds. Then as a UI designer, your job is, okay, the UX designer has told me that I need to do it in 2 to 3 seconds. So fine. So let me bring in a hierarchy. So through a hierarchy, I'll convey this. So the ones who are interested will consume the third level hierarchy. The ones who are not interested will not consume it. Because the point is, if I'm convinced with the macro picture, then I'll actually spend some time going through the details. So it's like layers of onion. One layer after the other, they unfold, the details unfold, slowly. Yeah. So now I'm happy to take questions. I think I've conveyed some of the theory which I wanted to convey. I'm happy to take questions.
So as an UI researcher, like how do you deal with very what do you say? What is this called? aspiring, very I'll just take a second.
By the way, it's not UI. I mean, I don't think you meant a UI researcher. You meant a UX researcher. So UX researcher is the one who's doing that user experience research to find out.
Correct. So as an UX researcher, how do you deal with very, what do you say, customer who is very greedy? Okay. So let me give an example. Let's say that we are a very budget headphone company, right? And we make budget products, but the customer is expecting a feature which is only far-fetched in a very expensive product. So it could be, we could actually see in review saying that this product doesn't have a background sound elimination, something like that, cancellation. Obviously, but for a price cost, we cannot afford or we can't give that thing. But customer is expecting that, which is a little complex, right? So how do you deal as an UX researcher to solve that problem? And I actually saw a company doing that. So they didn't have the first product with a clear background sound cancellation. Then the next product, they released a little higher price, but they were not still doing a good job. Then again, they were saying that the noise cancellation is not that much par. So again, it is a problematic. So what is your take on that?
So I think, see, UX research always has an overarching context of business. So your decisions of UX research would make sense when you have the appropriate business context, right? So when you have the business context, you understand, okay, what is the budget in which this product is to be made? And who are my users? What is it that they can afford and all of that? And sometimes the UX research might challenge the business model itself. The UX research might go and say, hey, this is something we will not be able to meet, right? So there, at least you're saving the money of the company because you're not hitting a dead end, right? You know that that's something you can't serve. So now in this case, once you know that your business segment is budget headphone purchasers, maybe their budget is only 600, 700 rupees and want to give a good headset there, then it's important for you to understand what are the needs of your users and don't just go based on what people are telling you. Because the person might say, I don't have noise cancellation, and maybe it's that the person just said because the person wanted to say and the person is not serious about it. And you find that out after making a major product and you ship that major product. That's a loss of so much of R&D and so much of capacity you built in-house to realize that feature and ship that feature at a scale, and then you realize, oh shit, why did I put all that up? So you don't just, you take whatever your customers are telling with a pinch of salt, right? So if the customer is saying noise cancellation is important, then you'd want to understand how important noise cancellation is for a customer. You want to cross question and ask, why is noise cancellation important? Are you willing to pay a premium for noise cancellation? If you're willing to pay a premium for noise cancellation, there are earphones at 900. Why are you not buying them? And you might want to just launch a few pieces, test them in a certain market and see if that's working or not. If people are willing to pay a premium for that noise cancellation before you bet big on it. So, and it's not like you're going to meet all the needs of the customer. It has to make business sense. So if you feel that there's so many needs and all those needs cannot be met, then you start looking at prioritizing, okay, which of the needs are very important for the user. And is the user okay if I'm able to meet these needs and not able to meet the other needs? Can I have a conversation with the user and find out? And then can I build a prototype and test that prototype and see if the user is okay with it? So the way you deal with your problem is by looking at the business context, right? Does it make business sense? And once you find something which makes a business sense, then you go back to the user, because it might make business sense, but the user might say, no, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't want it. If the user doesn't want it, then it no longer makes business sense. I mean, you might have thought it's viable, that you can do it within a budget and you feel the user can afford that budget, but the user feels, yeah, I can afford it, but I don't want it. Then you know that you may have to redo that exercise. Of course, that's tricky, but it's about balancing the user and balancing the business objectives. How do you do that? Iteratively, right? Do the conversations, make different iterations, initially only conceptual, then later prototype, and eventually you hit your sweet spot hopefully. Yeah.
And the second thing was for like, how do you deal with scaling with experience? So I would like give an imaginative scenario for DeepThought itself. So let's say that parents right now that they're having a good atmosphere. Let's say that the DeepThought is scaled for 1,000 students, right? Then obviously the parents would say that my students are not getting that much engaging. So what do you do is that you put in a very small, like 20 students per teacher. Then the parent says that I want that particular teacher, but I'm getting a different teacher. Like this teacher is not doing better than that. Then you do a teacher training. But obviously you cannot, like, such looping problems can simply come up in a scaling for a very high spectrum, right? So is that there'll be no end, right? So like it's like you'll be simply looping through. So what is your take on that as well?
So this is not completely a UX problem. It's also the core domain competence the organization brings to the table, right? I mean, maybe earlier you didn't have that ability to deliver that quality at a scale. So what is that process and what is that domain expertise the organization is bringing? That also is a part of the answer. But purely from a UX perspective, I think if I'm a UX researcher, the way I would look at this problem is, if the parent wants only that teacher, I'd want to understand what is that experience that teacher was able to create. What is that experience this teacher is not able to create? What is that elusive blind spot? How can I create that experience? And if the parent doesn't want a large batch size, then again, I understand what is it that the parent is getting in a small batch size, the parent is not getting in a large batch size, and how do I find other ways to, bring that in? And if my small batch size is giving some advantage, my large batch size can get another advantage. So can I show that advantage to people, and can I handle some of the deficiencies which the large batch size is bringing in? Like in Deep Thought, the thread builder and the other technology, make sure that every child is getting a chance to express. Every child is getting, recognized to some extent. So you're building some technology to deal with those problems. So I think it's about understanding their behaviors and understanding their aspirations. In general, users' aspirations are not too high, right? You're able to understand them. You can come up with ways to, deal with them. But the key is understanding what their aspirations and anxieties are.
This is kind of follow-up question. It's a follow-up question, but I think that you have answered this in a certain way. But I'm still putting this forward. Is that always, like, let's say that customers are expecting for something, but obviously you doing it is going to occur a loss for you. It's not like business. It doesn't make business sense for you, but it is going to make good value for your customers. Again, let's take an example of, let's say, again, this classroom. Okay, let's say you put it 20 students. They still feel I only want 5 people per teacher. Let's say that it is totally doesn't really make sense for you as a business. So how do you handle that type of case? Will you say that sorry, we're going to have it just 20 and you make that compromise, or again, like, so what is that action that we can take? So obviously you can say that I'm going to see what is that happening in that batch 5. Why can I not replicate with 20, right? But again, that is not
this is no longer a UX problem. This is a product problem. Because you are not able to create the desired experience within the desired budget. So either you say there's no business here, unless an invention happens, right? Let's say you do not have the invention of a Xerox machine, and you want a copy of a letter in just 1 rupee. A handwritten letter doesn't come in 1 rupee. So the kind of experience you want within the budget of 1 rupee is not possible unless you have the invention of the Xerox machine there. Or you want a face-to-face conversation with Shravan, and you don't have internet, you don't have cameras, and you want this conversation to happen at a budget of, say, 50 rupees. Not happening unless you have the camera and the internet. You can't go to his place in 50 rupees. So what you're talking of is not a UX problem anymore. It's a product problem. I need that invention. I need that competence to be coming in to deliver that experience. So as a UX person, I can understand what is that experience the user wants, what is the experience that the company wants to create, and see that are they aligned. If they're not aligned, that's going to have problems because the company is trying to do something, the user wants something else. There's going to be dissonance. So I bring that coherence between what the company wants to create and what the users want. And if the user expectation has to be changed, then in my journey, how am I educating the user to do the expectation setting properly? That's something I would be interested in as a UX designer or researcher. And if it's not making business sense, then within the budget, can I ask the product people to work only on specific problem statements? Because I realize that if you can create this kind of an experience, then you have a business waiting for you. So then I tell the product people that, okay, guys, we want this experience. Now, whether it's 5 people, 20 people, or okay, the parent is hell bent on 5 people. The parent is not looking at teacher quality as much. As long as you have 5 people and all the kids are getting a chance to talk, the parent, you can cut down your 1 hour to 40 minutes. The parent is okay with it. That's what I've noticed in my findings. You can cut down your class time because that will save a bit of your cost. You can cut down the skill level of the teacher because it looks like the parent is willing to have a smaller batch size than have a larger batch size with a more experienced teacher. But I've noticed that the parent is okay with it. This is a bare minimum of a teacher. So now if that your costs are cut down and the parent is willing to take a 20% hike on the price, offer it. But if the parent is not willing to take a 20% hike on the price, you say, okay, these are the insights. The parent will not pay 1 rupee more. The parent will want a teacher with A, B, C qualifications. The parent would want 5 people in a class. The parent is okay with 40 minutes. The parent wants the classroom experience to be this and objectives to be this. Do you think you can come up with a product like this and the parent is comfortable paying this much price? And if your answer is a no, then you know that's not a viable market for you. You don't go after it. But if you feel you can find a viable product which gives an experience which the user likes, then that's a market which you go into. But is that an experience which the user likes? The UX researcher can help you find out. Is it a viable product? The finance team can help you with that. Is it a product which we can make? The product team has to find out. So it's a very cross-functional problem that you've asked. Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is like, how do you deal with 2 majority parties? Like, obviously there is like, let's say that there's 2 parties exist, and even if one party wins, like if one party decision is taken, the other party is going to be ignored. So obviously, like I would say, an popular example is like, there was a fight between dark mode and light mode or something like that. Even in WhatsApp, I think there are people who are saying that they need very aggressive features like in Telegram, and there are people who are saying I need simplicity in WhatsApp, right? So again, there's a clash. In such a case, like your decision is really going to affect a set of batch of people, no matter what side you pick. So how do you handle such cases?
Business sense and your values guide you, right? You see business sense, but you don't see business sense, but your values urge you to do that. Then you have to find a way to finance it, and if you can find a way to finance it, you do it. How do you find a way to finance it? Is some philanthropist going to sponsor you, or are you going to leverage that goodwill you're getting out of that thing to do something else? So you have to find a business sense, I mean a broader business sense. That is, even if the customer is not willing to pay, can you raise the resources in some other manner? That broader business sense you find. And once you find the broader business sense, and if you realize both the things are important, then why not create 2 versions of your product? That's the beauty of technology, right? It can be so personalized. It can take a different shape for 2 people. And if they're so very different, you might need 2 different products altogether, not just 2 versions, but 2 products altogether. But there again, you need to see if it makes that business sense for you to make that extra product and give a very extra experience. If it doesn't make business sense, then you pick one segment and you serve only that segment, and you tell the other segment, sorry guys, maybe in the future we'll have something for you. I'm being asked all business questions, which I'm happy to answer, but I would appreciate if the UX part is picked up, because that's a very nuanced and tricky one.
I probably I'm asking a lot of business because I still didn't probably know what is UX.
Because see, as a UX person, your key responsibility is to be an advocate for the user in the company, to talk on behalf of the user, to understand the user really, really well. If required, fight against the company for the user. Just like how a HR is supposed to, if required, fight against the company for the people. So your UX person, in my opinion, is a representative of the customer in the company. Someone who's always going to represent the customer, like how an MLA represents the people of a constituency. So you understanding those minute things about a customer, which the entire company ignores. Because the company is biased. They're like, yeah, we are doing this for this reason. They defend what they're doing. No, this is not viable if I do it, and so on. If it's not viable, don't do it. Shut your business. Because the user doesn't want it. it's not viable and you still do it in a compromise mode, eventually the users walk away, or it'll just take one promising competitor to come and offer something else and they'll run away. Because it was basically an unstable marriage, right? So the UX person is here to give you all that intelligence and those insights into your users, which can help you take better care of your business. But for that, you need a good UX person who delivers. So if you want to be that good UX person, then you need that ability to win the trust of people, get those insights of people, that observation capabilities again to observe things and do it, and that ability to interact with the product, UI, and tech teams to ensure that it's generating a clean experience for the users. UX people are invaluable because if you have a UX person, from a business point of view, how you want to play the game. Your last 5 questions answers reveal that if you have a good UX person, you can play the game. But the question is, how do you get that good UX person? And this workshop is about how do you be that good UX person? How do you understand your consumers so well? How do you get obsessed about the pain points and pleasure points of the consumers? How do you get the unmet, unarticulated needs of your consumers? How do you understand the very internal feelings of your consumer, which the consumer is insecure about expressing? You understand some of those feelings. You can make products which protect such feelings. You have a loyal customer for life. Yeah.
Just got a very interesting case. Earlier, you have said that now these Ola drivers, they don't see where to go, right? They don't see the final destination, right? Correct. Like the drivers, cab drivers, they don't get to see where the final destination is going to be. So, but ideally, as an Ola company, they're serving for both drivers and customers. So actually, Ola should see both of them as a customers, right? A driver is a customer, and it's in a way, but these companies give a weightage to customers than these drivers, right? So it is a little bad experience for the driver because the driver wants to know where the location is. And the reason why that they wait for a call is that they often, when I call them, they ask me where's the point is, where's the drop off is. And depending on that, they would say they're coming or not. So in that case, if Ola is considering that to be feature, like if they're trying to give a good experience for the driver, can be a little harmful as well. It's a very sharp cutting edge sword, right? So what is your take on that?
So see, both of them are stakeholders and you'd want to carry all your stakeholders together, right? Otherwise you harm the experience for one stakeholder, a competitor comes, might take all your stakeholders away. And one problem which Ola is facing compared to the others is they don't have their own fleet. So some of the smaller competitors who are coming in have their own fleet. You have your own fleet, you don't have problem with cancellation, right? So there are challenges there. Again, I would say the same thing. You understand the user experience. You understand why the driver wants to know about that location. And I believe this is not again a pure UX problem. It's a product plus UX problem. So I mean, do you have some behavioral intelligence which is telling you in terms of how you can control the behavior of a driver to not reject trips to a certain location? So there again, I think deep level UX understanding is important, because if a driver is refusing a ride to another location, why is the driver refusing that ride? Because if I go there, will I get another ride from that place? Or if I have some concern, can you handle that concern? Because the company is not taking care of the driver. The company is only giving rights to the driver. So if you can address that problem, then you know that this behavioral thing can be solved. So it becomes a thing where the product and the UX teams have to work together. The product team in terms of, okay, and the finance team also. Can I give a financial assistance to a driver to go to a new location? Now, if I don't want to give the financial assistance and I still want to give a good experience to the driver, then can I tell the passenger that, boss, there'll be a surge pricing here. You'll have to pay 1.5x fare because there's a location where, historically speaking, our data tells that getting a ride back is difficult. So if you're still keen, you can book a cab and all of that. But you feel the user feels cheated for doing that, then you may want to again come up with a loyalty program where you say, okay, I'll take that 0.5x on myself because you're a loyal user. But there again, you need to understand, taking that X amount on yourself, is it worth the loyalty you're getting from the user? Or one way you can deal with it is, I am thinking out aloud as a product person, is if you're charging that 0.5x for this, you say I'm incurring a surge pricing, but because you're a valuable customer, this month, this amount, a little bit, I'm taking on myself. And you show it in the wallet. I've already taken this on myself. Then the next ride, 15 rupees I'm taking on myself. Other 35 rupees, I want you to bear it. So that way you can design that experience where you tell the user that, hey, I'm charging you for this reason. Some amount of cost I already took on myself because you're a valuable customer. And then that loyalty, how much amount you want to take on yourself, you again run through your financial numbers and see how much you can take up for retaining a customer. That goes into your marketing budget. Again, it's a cross-functional problem. But in this cross-functional problem, you would want that UX person in, because that UX person is taking the side of the driver or taking the side of the passenger and says, the passenger is okay to pay extra, but the passenger doesn't want to feel cheated, that this company is cheating me and this company is exploiting me. So then your product team thinks of, okay, how do I win that? How do I create that trust through my product? Then you're like, okay, can I bear a bit of that cost and let them know that I'm taking that cost? So that's how the product and business teams are, solving it together. And the UX person is just telling more and more details of the person so that you're not going into wrong assumptions and going on a different trajectory. Where this intel, right? It's like, UX team is like the CIA for the product and technology teams, right? You get that intel. So you need that intel that the customer is okay paying extra, but the customer doesn't want to feel cheated. Or this customer just can't pay extra, but this customer is giving you consistent revenue through the month. So maybe can I cross subsidize because this customer would need this ride only once in a while? Or can I find some other way of meeting this need which will come only once a month? Because this customer is banking on me to meet this need also. That the UX person will tell. That I can tell the customer, I won't serve you for this place because it's difficult. But the customer wants to know that you're with the customer. So can you have a tie-up with a bus or someone and say, hey, we have a tie-up with a bus and you can actually travel in a bus or you can book a bus with us. I'm just thinking aloud, right? So they have to understand the real aspirations and the real behavior of the customer. That will help the product teams in solving the problem better if a UX person is able to understand what the customer really wants. Because a lot of times you don't understand. You feel like, okay, the customer doesn't want to pay. But you realize, okay, maybe there are customers who are willing to pay, but they don't want to feel cheated. Or maybe there's a driver who doesn't mind going there for the same price, but wants some other assurance or is unsure about something, is into some assumptions. So if you can actually build that relationship and get those insights, then probably will be more efficient at solving the problem because you understand the ground rules better. Otherwise, you're working with your assumptions, which are actually not true. So how do you get those ground rules? The UX person has to dig them and get them. The UX person has to know the end user so well that knowing that end user, you're able to get those ground rules. But you're in trouble if your team consists of completely people who only take their own stand and who are only doing like, this is right, so I'm doing it. Then your UX person becomes even more important because that UX person has to fight the entire team for the user. Because the team is like, no, I'm doing what I think is right. The UX person has to say, you're doing what you think is right. But who is the one who's using it? You or the user? Who has to be happy about it? That becomes very important. That's why a UX person becomes very, very valuable to take the side of the user. Because the UX person knows the user really, really well. Yeah.
Again, this is again an interesting problem which I've seen, but I just want to know your views on it. So the problem was that in YouTube, there is a lot of these very clickbait thumbnails, right? So and there was an article saying that how these clickbait thumbnail on everyday base are earning nearly more than 10 crores plus, and there was a lot of forums answering it whether the YouTube should take action on it or it's a community based problem. It is not like YouTube. It doesn't come under YouTube direction something. So YouTube hasn't taken any action on these clickbait thumbnails, but yet people are thinking that it is a community based. It is about that particular channel's problem, something like that. So if I was a UX designer at YouTube, should I take this problem or just leave it as such?
But definitely, see, you're a UX researcher, you alone can't deal with it. You need some more additional information to deal with it, but definitely it comes under UX because if Again, what kind of a UX designer are you? Are you a UX designer who's thinking of the short term? Or are you a UX designer who's trying to design an experience which will be a relationship for 5 to 10 years? And are you a company which is looking at impact, sustainable impact, or are you looking at, getting some value out of customers? Like if you're a UX designer in Coke and you're somebody who's looking for sustainable impact, you can't do well there because you're supposed to sell oily food, you're supposed to sell sugar water, both of which are unhealthy, right? At Pepsi. So it overlaps with the value system also. For example, in the case of deep thought, the value system clearly tells that we're not going to make something addictive if that addiction is going to hurt the user. So then the kind of UX you're creating, you'll be careful to ensure that while you're improving your UX, you don't end up making it addictive. You also do enough demarketing on the app through the UX because you believe you preventing the user from using the app after a while is actually good UX. So again, it boils down to the value system and the business assumptions. Because as I said, the UX only makes sense under a larger business context. So the big question is, does YouTube care? Now, if I'm a UX activist, I would say, no, YouTube is being notorious. They're making money, they're happy about it, they're blaming the community, although they are the ones who are driving that behavior. They can change it. If you want to, you can change it. So as a UX activist, of course, I would say, no, YouTube is just taking a political stand here. They're taking a diplomatic stand here, but they're enjoying that money they're getting out of that bad behavior. A lot of business questions, some UX methodology questions. Yeah.
One question comes here about the UX. Whenever you are interviewing someone, there are high chances that you might not get the insights that are actual insights, but the customer may move on tangents. So how will you ensure that the customer not move on tangents?
One, you have focused questions in terms of what you want to understand. You have your objectives documented in terms of what you want to understand before the interaction. You may get extra also, but you know what is the bare minimum you're looking for. So as an extra, as in you want, let's say you have 3 questions for which you want answers, you go in. But the customer talks about something else which is very useful. You document that because that's an important insight. That's a blind spot too if you have not scoped it in your plan initially. But how do you know if the user is casual and the user is serious? Cross-question the user. Look at the body language of the user. Look at the eyes and eyebrows of the user. One problem with a lot of people who do user interviews is they don't look at the user. Why are you doing a user interview if you don't look at the user? I mean, if someone doesn't look at the user second by second, I would say you shouldn't be doing the user interview. Someone else more competent should do the user interview. So what is that competence you would require for user interview? Every second, look at their eyes, eyebrows, and all of that. From that, you know how serious they are about it. How much they want it, or how much they're burdened by it, how much they're pained by it. Why is it a lot of people don't recognize it? Because they don't look at the body language. They just look at the words. They said, I want noise cancellation headset. I'm making a noise cancellation headset. Is that fellow just being fickle or is that fellow serious? If you would observe the body language and cross-question them a bit, you would have got an answer. So if they're going on tangents and they mean it, but they're taking you in so many directions, then again, right? You say, okay, I want to understand this segment before going to other segment and so on. Or you say, okay, first interaction, I will not have any agenda. I will just note down what all they have to say. I know it's random, but let me note down everything. Second interaction, you go in with an agenda because you notice that, okay, these are the things they want. These are the things they're happy. Then by all that random things they would have given you, you make a more intelligent questionnaire and intelligent things which you want to understand and go and understand. So in some cases, your UX research might need multiple interactions. So either you go with a very focused objective and you moderate them in the first attempt itself, or in the first attempt you say, no, let me go with an open book. Let them express and rant or express whatever they want. I will note down everything. And then I will analyze, I'll do psychoanalysis of all the words. I'll try to take a recording of the video and see where their eyebrows went up, where they were very serious. And from that, I understand what are the things which are important. And then next interaction, I'll dig up more about this and get more insights around this. Of course, insight spotting is a skill and that has to be acquired, right? I'm listening to people how to spot an insight. While you're trying to improve your insight spotting, a good thing to do is probably record the whole thing so you can revisit it again. And when you go through the recording also, pay attention to the parts where the emotion is intense when they're talking. Then you know there's a deep insight. You know that that's something very important for them. Just by listening to the words, you may not get it, but you focus on the emotion through the body language and the diction, intonation. You get a few things which they're not able to express in the form of words. Does this answer your question?
Yes.
It's about how you plan your thing, right? You want your thing to be focused, you have your questions and you moderate them. You don't want to be focused first time, that's okay. You don't mind anyway, then going on times. You've got to have a way to moderate them whenever you want to focus. You've got to have a way to cross question them. You've got to have a way to read their body language to get some more detail.
Can you give some example of cross questioning?
Let's say the person says, I want noise cancellation headset. You ask, why do you want noise cancellation? You ask, are you happy with the existing headset without noise cancellation? Then are you willing to pay another 300 rupees for that noise cancellation? If you're willing to pay, then why aren't you buying the existing, headset? Why not use a speaker? Why this? So when you ask so many questions like this, you look at how obsessed the person is about the noise cancellation headset. While asking so many questions, no, the speaker can't match that experience. The experience of a noise cancellation headset is this and all that the person is saying. Okay, this person is really keen on the noise cancellation headset. You divert that person to some other option and the person is happy with that option. Then this person is just a little fickle here. You got the idea of cross-questioning?
Yeah.
You're not just looking at answers, you're also looking at conviction, how much that person believes in what that person is telling.
Okay, so I just hope this is a UX question, but okay. So should an UX person only take decision only when it makes business sense, or just because it can actually make a good experience for the user? And let me give you an example. Say that basically there's a app. Okay, so there's a deep thought app, and I'm a left-hander, and basically I like the menu being on my opposite side. Okay, but I don't expect it. But if it is there, I'll be happy. Okay, I would be like, I'll be happy for the app providing that experience to me, right? And again, as a UX designer, if he or she thinks about providing me a left-hand interface, okay, it can actually give me a good experience. But as a business, it's going to take a lot of costing, right? Because you have to design the entire thing, you have to invert it, and all those stuff is there. So what is a decision to be taken?
I already answered this question in a different workshop where I said business sense is not about minimizing the budget. Business sense is done in a more holistic context. So the question is, if I have to incur a cost in making a left-hand experience or whatever, there has to be a way to finance that cost. Do I have a way to finance that cost? If there's a way to finance that cost, I will do it. Now, if your way to finance that cost is some investor is going to take care of that cost, well, then the puzzle is not fully answered. If the investor is taking care of the cost, the investor wants a return on that cost and a bigger return. Then how are you going to give that bigger return? Are you going to say a lot of left-handers will use it and you learn money out of left-handers and then repay the investor? Or is a donor, some foundation for left-handers, are they going to sponsor this cost? Or will left-handers start paying a premium right now so that you give a separate left-hander product? There has to be some way of financing that cost. If there's some way of financing that cost, that's when you can take the first. Or the company has surplus revenues and surplus profits and the company is generous enough to, as a part of CSR, say that, okay, fine, we'll do it. There has to be some way of financing it. If there's a way of financing it, it will be done. And usually UX person doesn't make decisions. Again, it depends on the hierarchy of the organization, right? If the UX person is taking decisions, then the person is no longer just UX. The person is also doing product, UX, and a lot of other things. But in a lot of structures, the idea of having a UX person is you have a person who represents the user, who understands the pain of the user, sits in the meeting to talk on behalf of the user, to talk about what pain the user is facing and what we need to do to win the users, what we need to do to create a good experience for the users. So this person is talking on behalf of the users. Okay. No questions on UX process, how you do UX questions? Okay, then I'll summarize and conclude. So I would say if I have to condense all of these, put the tools aside and just look at it at the macro level, it's about what kind of intelligence or what kind of insights I'm able to get around the user, what the user wants, the things which I do not know, which I'd want to know, right, about the user, how the user is feeling. And it's not just in the cognitive domain, it's in the emotive domain. So the person who is working on UX would need a lot of training on that aspect, right? Like how do I empathize and how do I get what the user feels, and how do I operate both in the cognitive and emotive domain, where I'm not just going by the words or the logic of what the person is saying, but I'm also understanding the emotion there. And for somebody who doesn't understand emotion, UX is not a field. The person has to first develop that ability to understand emotion, and then the person can work in the field of UX, because UX is more about emotion than about anything else. I understand their experience by seeing what all emotions they're going through, and I architect an experience with certain emotions. So want to grow as a UX researcher, then I think got to spend time with people, got to look at their body language very carefully, look at their emotions carefully, and see if you're able to guess their emotions and body language carefully. So if you're able to get that kind of sensitivity, I think rest of the things will fall in place. Yeah.
So again, so two questions here. So while being in the MVP stage, okay, starting the app from first, should an UX designer should be in the scratch, like should start first, then build the process, or like business people make a basic app, then test it out to the users, then the UX says the changes? And that is question number one. And question number two is that sometimes changes need some experience, right? Let's say like a keyboard. So keyboard is not arranged A to Z order, but there is a pattern which is there, and it took time for people to adapt to it. Now people are very comfortable to it. So in that case, there is like as a very experienced user, they will know that people are going to adapt, right? But sometimes can also go in a wrong way as well, right? In such like, is that so what is your thought on that as well? Because sometimes it could be a very bad experience, but only time can be a good experience, right?
So as far as question one is concerned, both the approaches are fine. In the approach where you have a UX person right from the beginning, I think even in the MVP thought process, you would lay a foundation in terms of how you want to understand the user and how you want to set up your processes and the data which you're going to collect from a UX perspective. You can lay a foundation if you have a UX person right from the beginning, because there's a person who's thinking from the user's perspective. So even in that MVP brainstorming, you have a person who takes the side of the user. That could be useful. And the person through the MVP drills and all, the person is trying to understand the user, where it becomes an integral part of what you're doing as a company. So that can be the advantage if you have the person right from the beginning. You don't have the funds, you don't have the person, then that's okay. Maybe you build an MVP and then get a person to look at it and then you redo the whole thing. But I feel some very obvious blunders can be avoided if you had a UX person right from the beginning. Some very obvious things like this, is painful anyway, because developers don't think about comfort. They just think about their own comfort of what is comfortable to code. So having a UX person right from the beginning can be useful in that sense. Some very obvious blunders can be avoided. Now, as far as experience stabilizing over a period of time, there again, then that kind of UX research can be expensive. You'd want to maybe work with people whose learning curve is faster, experiment with them and see if it's stabilizing over a period of time. And there again, you have to do a cost benefit analysis, right? What's the cost involved in handling that steep learning curve? And what's the benefit you're getting out of it? And do you see business sense? If you don't see business sense, then it won't work. You'll have to find some other way of dealing with it. Yeah.
I'm just curious because I have attended UX classes, and what you're saying is like the entire topic is completely different what these people are teaching. So like I was like, are we going on track, or is it like is it you? Because what they have touched is taught like is buttons and etc. like coloring like that, like, and this is completely different. So is this really what we are trying to see is really UX, or is it like a different perspective from your side?
Okay. Point number one, what I'm talking of UX is, I think what Don Norman talks of UX, who's the father of UX. And what you attended in that workshop is not UX, is UI. UI and UX are two different things. How to make your buttons, what will happen with your buttons is your UI, right? So UX is about what is that experience I want to create for the end user. So of course, one concept you come up with is UX journey. What is that experience journey of the user? Now to design that experience journey, you might have a kind of a UI, right? Like the person drags the mouse on top of the button, I will show this or this shadow will come, this actions can come in, and so on. Again, there, why do you bring that in? Because you want to create a certain experience. So this is basically what kind of UX I want to achieve. Once you know the kind of UX you want to achieve, you design a UI accordingly. But as I said again, the people with very less work experience who don't understand UX in a more mature and philosophical way, they limit UX to buttons and colors and all. But when you talk to people with a lot of experience in UX, they look at it in a larger context, not just the digital tools, but in terms of what is the experience you're giving to the user overall. Is the user happy about it? Is the user feeling a sense of achievement out of it? What emotion you want to create, and were you able to create it? That is what UX is from a larger perspective. Okay, this concludes the session. All of you have a nice Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.